Choosing a Life by ginnyrules27, Chapter 49. Ryan smiled softly as he curled up with CJ, his back resting against the bark of the tree they were under, as the remnants of their picnic date sat in the sun. There was not really any rhyme or reason as to why they were under the tree. Okay, that was a lie. There was no rhyme and reason that CJ knew. As far as the blonde knew, the only reason they were there was because they hadn't been able to spend as much time together now that they were both working, and Ryan had such a crazy hours as a member of the Raw team's coaching staff. However, Ryan knew exactly why they were out there. The ring box in his pocket felt like an anchor, and at the same time, Ryan knew there was no other spot where he wanted to ask the biggest question of his life, then the spot where CJ kissed him for the very first time. The ring was relatively simple, with a golden band and yellow stones that almost seemed to match CJ's hair trailing down the side, stopping midway and a lone large stone in the centre. It had taken a few months of overtime, but Ryan wasn't just going to have Lord Hades give him the ring. Pirates didn't do that. VKs didn't do that. If they were going to get something, they were going to earn it. Even if Ryan also knew that Lord Hades had gone and given the money to Henry for him to give back to Ryan via Rhea ratting out to her father. "You're quiet," CJ said, pulling Ryan out of his thoughts. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," Ryan nodded as he looked over at her and gave her a small smile. "Just thinking." "Care to share with the class?" CJ teased, and Ryan chuckled and shook his head. CJ smiled softly and scooted closer to him. "It's been so long since I had you braid my hair. Think you've lost your touch?" "Oh, I doubt it," Ryan said with a small smile as he began to do just that. While braiding hair would always remind him of his sister, Ryan found that it didn't hurt as much when he would do it for CJ after Christie's death. And now, after so many years had gone by, Ryan was happy that he was able to think about Christie without wanting to curl up into a ball and have the world pass him by. "You know what this reminds me of?" "I think I can guess, but why don't you tell me?" CJ told him, a small smile pulling at her lips. Ryan couldn't help but smile at the memory. "The day we had our first kiss." "And here I thought you were going to say it reminded you of the day Mal finally turned Freddie into an ex-person," CJ teased. "Hey, it just so happens that day happened to have both events at the same time." Ryan chuckled and gently kissed her cheek before finishing up the braid. Once his hand was no longer occupied by the task at hand, he smiled as he could still feel the ring box in his pocket. "We've come a long way from being the kids who used to plot ways off the Lost Revenge, huh?" CJ turned so she was looking at him and smiled. "Yeah, we've been through a lot, haven't we?" Some of it for the better, CJ thought, as she thought about her current relationship with her brother. The CJ who used to try and sneak off the Lost Revenge to try and prove herself to the crew that she was old enough to assist with face-offs would never have imagined she'd get to the point where Harry would willingly spend time with her, let alone give Ryan the shovel talk after they'd hit their 1-year anniversary. He had claimed he didn't want to scare Ryan off too fast, and the fact that he had made it a year with all the insanity being with a Hook sibling brought proved to Harry that Ryan was in it for the long haul. Hence why it had been the perfect time to give Ryan the shovel talk, as people in Oradon called it. The kids of the Isle had a similar talk. It was the "you hurt them and death by hyena would be too good for you" talk. Jade had had a similar talk with one of the evil step-granddaughters after word reached her ear that said evil step-granddaughter had chased Jay around a dragon hall after he had flirted with her at a party despite his multiple tries to get her to leave him alone. He had finally managed to ditch her by hiding behind a statue, but that had been the catalyst for Jade's talk. And Jade had wrestled a 6-foot-long crocodile, so she could be scary when she needed to be. Granted, she had almost drowned, but it was the scary factor that was still there. It had also been rather fortunate that Ava Tremaine had also heard about what had happened, and so had, without planning to, met up with Jade when she went to go and give the evil step-granddaughter the talk. CJ didn't know exactly what Ava Tremaine had said, but she did know that through the scuttlebutt of the aisle that Dizzy had been mentioned. CJ shook her head softly as she shoved her thoughts down. It wasn't that she didn't like thinking about Harry or Jade or the aisle, but that she knew that if she brought it up, she might make Ryan sad if he thought about his sister. You know, one thing that hasn't changed, Ryan said, his voice soft, and CJ looked over at him. It's always been us together. Through every plot and scheme, thick and thin. It's always been you and me. Right. Why do I have the sense you're leading up to something? CJ asked. Ryan smiled and pulled the ring box out of his pants' pocket. I love you, Callie. You're my best friend. Will you plot and scheme with me forever? Will you marry me? CJ stared at the ring in shock, her old nickname barely registering in her ears. In all honesty, she would have never thought she'd have a ring like that. Oh, not because Ryan couldn't afford it or anything. She wasn't shallow by any means, but because she just didn't think about it. However, looking at the ring in front of her, CJ couldn't deny the fact that it was perfect. Everything about the proposal was, in fact, because it had come from Ryan, and there was no one who felt more deeply than the brunette before her. Okay, maybe Henry, but that kinda went without saying. Plus, Henry practically raised Ryan, so it was safe to say Ryan came by it honestly. Wow, did my thoughts just go down a weird path? CJ thought, and Ryan's still waiting for an answer. I should probably put him out of his misery. You know, I think we probably just lost a lot of the members of the crew a lot of money. Haven't they had bets on us getting together going as far back as when we both turned 15? CJ said as she took the ring out of the box and slipped it onto her hand. Ryan shook his head. Nah, I think the whole betting on people thing stopped after Harry and Uma got out of their denial, and Henry proved he wasn't going to marry his sword. Wait, are you... What do you think? CJ asked, holding up her hand to show Ryan the ring. Does it suit the next Mrs. Williams? Ryan shook his head. Nah, I think it suits the next Mrs. Hook. Ryan, I'm not going to make you give up your last name. I want to, CJ. Besides, your last name has more gravitas in the pirate world. If we have kids, they should have that protection. CJ smiled softly and gently kissed Henry on the cheek. Compromise? We could hyphenate, like how Harriet and Sammy do it. I think that sounds fair, Ryan nodded, but your name goes last. You're going to be stubborn about this, aren't you? I'm probably about as stubborn as you are, and you know it. Still want to marry me? You're not going to chase me away that easily. CJ smiled and leaned her head on Ryan's shoulder. I would never chase you away. Though my siblings might be a different story. I may have asked them for their blessing before the marriage, Ryan said sheepishly, and CJ's eyes went wide and she looked over at him. You did what? Henry told me it's apparently what's done in Oridon, especially since Derek managed to avoid doing it with Piper since, you know, her father's horrible, and Henry didn't want both his brothers not doing it. Otherwise it might look like we were sticking our noses up at Oridon's traditions, Ryan explained. Philip was giving him some prince lessons since, Henry's technically a prince after he married Claudine and she was adopted by Aurora and Philip, thus making her a princess. Something I'm sure none of us ever thought would happen back when we were all living on the Isle. CJ snorted in amusement as she shook her head. Okay, how much did my siblings prattle on about us being babies? Ryan chuckled. Harry was surprisingly fine with it. He was? Yeah. He said the fact that I hadn't been scared off by his talk with me after our 1-year anniversary as a couple showed him that I wasn't just going to up and leave you if life got hard. He just had one ask for the wedding. Well, 2 actually. What were they? CJ asked. That we wait to have the wedding until Uma has her baby, so she doesn't accidentally take the spotlight off her by having the baby during the wedding. That's fair. What was the second? That, if you wanted, he'd walk you down the aisle, like he did with Harriet, but that, if you'd rather your father do it, he'd understand. Ryan said, and CJ's eyes went wide. Oh, not that Harry had offered to walk her down the aisle. It wasn't that big of a shock after he'd done it for Harriet at her wedding. But that Harry actually thought that she'd rather their father be there than him. Because she knew she had to pick one of them, lest she put her brother through hell, wondering when their father would snap. And she also knew that if she had to pick one, then there was only going to be one she would pick. I hope you told him he's insane for even thinking I'd want the captain at my wedding. She said, it's Harry and Harriet walking me down the aisle of our wedding, or no one does. Ryan nodded, giving her a small smile. I suspected that. I hope it's okay that I told Harry to be prepared for you to tell him the same thing that you just told me. What did he say to that? That it was a good thing I wanted to marry you, with how well I know you. CJ smiled as Ryan gently kissed her on the cheek before turning her head to admire her ring. She had never thought she'd be one of those types of women who would go gaga over jewellery, but it was something different when Ryan gave it to her. Maybe it was because of their childhood. Maybe it was because of how they grew up without parents who would often wear jewellery, like the ring CJ had on her finger. It didn't matter though. All she knew was that she wouldn't have traded this ring for all the items in the Cave of Wonders. If you want a different ring, I can get it for you, Ryan said, his soft voice breaking into his thoughts. I tried to work more overtime, Callie, but Jones said I couldn't work more than 4 hours of overtime a week because of the fact that I'm still around swords. She has met Henry, right? CJ asked. How many times have we wondered how he had time for sleep with how often he'd train? But that doesn't matter, because I don't need a new ring, right? I promise you that. I love this one. So don't try to wear yourself down or anything, okay? You're sure? Did I stutter? I'm sure, Ryan. You don't have to freak out about this, I'm not some prissy pink princess who'd scream if the stones on the band weren't the right size. Oh no, Ryan said. But you're a hook. You're practically pirate royalty, and You are my wonderful best friend and first mate if we ever form a crew of our own. You are the only man I want to be with, and if you say the words pirate royalty regarding my family again, I'll ask Mal if I can borrow his stell so he can chase the stupid out of you, CJ said firmly. There is only one family who can claim they are pirate royalty, and that is the family of Pirate King Elizabeth Turner. Pirate Queen? Oh, whatever she calls herself. She's still the elected leader of the Pirate Brotherhood. Would you consider Henry pirate royalty, though? Considering he's married to Claudine and her mum was Captain Red Jessica of the Rose? Plus the whole she's a princess and he's a prince thing. How'd you hear about that? Henry and Claudine like to talk when they forget I'm in the room sometimes. Ryan shook his head. It's okay though. I use that time to do my unclely duties and rile up their girls. And speaking of girls, should we figure out who we're going to have as a flower girl? CJ snorted and shook her head. Okay, first off, I don't think unclely is a word. And second of all, we have plenty of time. Didn't you say Harry asked that we not get married until after their second kid is born? Well, yeah, Ryan nodded. But, I mean, I don't know. I kind of wanted to start talking wedding stuff, is all. I'm excited to marry you. CJ gave him a loving smile and gently kissed his cheek. And I'm excited to marry you, she told him. And how about this for talking about wedding stuff? You're going to tell me who you want as groomsman. She, of course, had no idea who she had asked to stand with her as her matron of honour / maid of honour. She could ask Harriet, but then that would run the risk of potentially hurting her relationship with Harry. I was thinking I'd take a page out of both Henry and Derek's books and have two best men, Ryan said. Why am I not surprised? CJ said with a small smile. But, you know, you may have just solved an issue I realised I was going to have. Ryan tilted his head and brushed a bit of CJ's blonde hair away from her face as it escaped from her braid from the slight breeze blowing through the trees, and it landed in her eyes. Oh? What was that? Who was going to be standing with me out of my siblings? Ryan told him. I know normally it's just women on the bride's side, but... CJ, you know perfectly well that none of us care about tradition, Ryan told her. And you also know that Harry would gladly stand with you for your wedding. As would Harriet. Supporting you would be a no-brainer for them. And if they did say no, then you were either going to take an imposter or it's because they're dying. Harry can't die. Lady Persephone gave him the gift of immortality for a wedding present. She said. In all honesty, she hadn't even been surprised when Harry told her and Harriet about the gift. As she had told him, the minute they learned he'd be marrying Uma, they figured something like that would happen. Her brother would follow Uma to the ends of the earth, and everyone knew it. So we're thinking small wedding party? Ryan asked. Yeah, CJ nodded. I mean, it's us, right? We're not really having a big wedding type of people. I mean, I'm thinking having Henry, Derek, Harriet, and Harry standing with us is perfect. I think you're right, Ryan nodded. Though, you know we're going to have to find a way to make Clara, Haley, Helena, and Harry and Uma's newest kid have some role in our wedding. We will? CJ asked, tilting her head. I mean, Lady Persephone may have mentioned the idea of junior bridesmaids when I went to Lord Hades for help with getting your ring, Ryan told her, and Clara at least would be old enough to act as a junior bridesmaid by the time we actually get married. CJ chuckled. Oh, she would she? Well, I mean, with a timeline and all. I mean, Uma's got to be able to have the baby, and then recover from giving birth, and then readjust to the baby waking her and Harry up at all hours. Plus, if the baby wakes up Eleanor. Okay, how much thought have you put into this? CJ asked as she held a hand up to cut off the rambling that just started to occur. Ryan, you really don't have to worry about this. I'd marry you tomorrow in front of Lady Hera if that's how sure I am I want to marry you. I don't need fuss. I don't need to be the centre of attention. Okay? Our allies and our family being there. That's all I want. What about cake? Well, cake goes without saying. Who ever heard of a wedding without cake? CJ asked and Ryan chuckled. CJ smiled as she heard his chuckles and rested her head on his shoulder. They would have all the time in the world to worry about what the future held for them. She only wanted to enjoy this moment with the beautiful sun and the man she loved. And judging by how Ryan held her close, it seemed he was on board for the same thing. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that one. Absolutely love that one. So flipping cute. Ah, that was a lovely engagement, and I've got wedding on the brain because of things happening in my arena, but I won't go into details because it's not my wedding. But let's just say I'm very excited. Anyway, yeah, just gorgeous. I love how much thought he put into this. And I hope you like the sly edge I've added to CJ's voice. I imagine hers is very sarcastic. Anyway, you guys know the drill. Like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video. Have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye, my guys, girls, and all bye, pals. I'll see you in another video. Take care.